So there's some rituals that we have before we record a podcast every week. We, sit in the room on a video call. We have our lights on bright. We have a little app on our phones that beeps in sync so that we can sync up the podcast audio easily afterwards. And usually we chat for a few minutes before we get going. And sometimes we record those and they become the cold open. But today, I'm doing something a little bit different. Brad's still out. He's still dealing with some family stuff, and we'll be back when he's back. And I really appreciate all the thoughts that people have sent to him. It's been lovely to see the comments and the messages on Discords and stuff. It's really nice. I know he'll appreciate it when he's back. But it's been a minute since we did a Q&A episode, since I did a Q&A episode, and rather than subject someone else to some poor guest host and waste their expertise on a rambling question and answer episode, I sat down and I made a big giant list of questions from our audience, from the Question Seeking Answers channel or the podcast email address, which I'll share in a minute after the intro. And we're going to do questions. But before we get to that, it's just weird to sit in a dark room and record a podcast. Welcome to Brad and Will Made a Tech Pod. I'm Will, and I'm here solo today. It's just me, and a bunch of questions from you, the listener. I went through our Question Seeking Answers channel in the Discord, where you can post your own questions if you're in the Discord, and dug through TechPod at content.town and pulled up a ton, just an absolute boatload of questions out. Now I saved some of them, because there's some that are Brad questions, so there's some that are saved for later, and at some point when he's back, we'll go through the backlog of questions and we'll pull some out, because there's some real bangers on things like drive pools and building a custom router that are outside of my scope of interest, and he actually has some real expertise there to answer. So we'll come back to those. If we didn't answer your technical banger about topics of interest to Brad, don't worry, we'll probably circle back around, or you can send it back in again if you want. But again, if you want to send a question, you can send it to techbot@content.town, or you can go to the Question Seeking Answers channel in the Discord and post your question in there. So I guess without further ado, I'm going to start with the first question, which is, let's see, hold on. I'm doing a new format on the file, so I got to dig a little bit here. Here we go. Chris asks, oh wait, we do it the other way, don't we? Have you ever talked about camera drones on the podcast? Recently, I was on YouTube, and YouTube recommended me an Inspire 1 video from Adam Savage's Tested, and lo and behold, it was you, Will, talking to a DJI rep. That got me thinking, I don't recall you guys ever talking about camera drones on the Tech Pod. Now, I haven't listened to every show, so perhaps you did. So do you use them? And if so, what sorts of things do you do with them? If you use other types of drones like FPV ones, I would love to know. So there was a brief period of time in the early 2010s when drones were exciting and new, and Norm and I both got super duper into them. And then they started regulating where you can use them. And it turns out, where we live in Northern California, where there's a lot of urban density and a lot of people around, and a lot of the open area is actually national forest or park. It's not a great place to fly drones, because a lot of the places that we would think are good drone flying places are prohibited. I also live just outside that 3-mile exclusion zone or whatever it is for SFO. I'm down in a hole in a valley, like with mountains surrounding me. So it should, like, at the altitudes at which you fly drones, shouldn't matter, but we're still excluded for, good reasons. So yeah, there's not a great place to fly near us. So I once I left Tested and I stopped covering them all the time. I haven't spent as much time with them. Also, that market kind of faster than almost any other technology product I've ever seen went from, wow, this is really new and there's a lot of stuff happening every week, every month, or every week, to, oh yeah, okay, so there's like 3 companies that make these, and then you can do kits if you want, and then there's like racing stuff happening off to the side and some other weird stuff. But like the cameras and the flight platforms got really good really, really fast. So I haven't spent a lot of time paying attention to them in the last few years. I do occasionally, if I need one for something, I'll borrow one from, I have a couple of friends who have them that will let me borrow, and I still have my, I did the thing to get the FAA license for flying them. I don't know, actually, it may have expired by now because it's been probably 10 years since I did that, and I bet it's run out at this point. So anyway, that's it. That's why we don't do a lot of drone stuff. If we lived in the Midwest, someplace where I had like a 15-acre farm and could fly around and do fun stuff, I would totally have a couple FPV drones and do the high-speed, like racing-y type stuff where you're flying through tubes and stuff like that. That seems really fun. And if I'm being honest, getting the 3D printer and setting that up and getting it going again has made me look at like RC cars and drones as a thing I should maybe pay attention to again. So there you go. Anonymous Rad Doc asks, wait, do we do it the other way? That last question was from Chris. Brad usually reads the questions. This is the part I'm bad at. On last week's pod, you brought up eyewear options for computing/screen work. I'm a radiologist, and for the last 15 years, I've had 2 pairs of glasses, everyday lenses, and one pair of glasses specifically focused on the distance of a computer screen. And it's been life-changing. I stayed away from progressives because of my concern for neck strain, given that I sometimes have to look at 4 or 5 monitors in different configurations, and limiting my field of focus in any way is less than helpful in my line of work. The anti-reflective coatings are a great way to go as well. Highly recommended. And that's from Anonymous Rad Doc. So thank you for sending that in. My glasses are on the way, so I'll let you know how it goes. I ended up doing the same thing. I actually, my screens are about arm's length away, but 4 feet, 3.5 feet, I guess. And yeah, I got glasses. I got a prescription that's set for that focal range, so I'll let you know how it goes. I'm curious because that is my like the problem for folks. If folks don't remember, the problem I'm having specifically is that my normal glasses, I need bifocals, but most of the work I do is not in the, like, tilting my head up to use the bifocals on computer screens would be miserable. So that's where I'm at. So good to hear that it's worked out for you, Anonymous Rad Doc, and thanks for sending that in. Let's see, we've got, oh, here's a fun one. I've been seeing in the press/videos that only Intel's full GPUs support SR-IOV to allow virtualizing GPUs to split them up for different VMs, containers, and workloads. That embedded iGPUs wouldn't get support for this, even though the latest iGPU chiplet stuff was using the same tech as the big dedicated GPUs. But this repo, and there's a link to a GitHub repo, seems to hint that the new Linux XE driver will support from 15th and possibly 14th gen iGPUs with SR-IOV. I'm interested in video encode machine learning models rather than LLM stuff, but I'm sure it could be used for that as well. That is a fascinating thing. This is from Ben. Thanks, Ben. So SR-IOV, for folks who don't know, is the tech that lets you basically slice up a GPU for, like they said, VMs, Docker containers, stuff like that. And typically it's a thing you get on really, really high end, like not even like consumer level cards, but the kind of pro cards that are limited to server workloads. So like the big NVIDIA, I can't remember what they are. They're not the DGXs. They're the industrial compute cards that they sell. Intel's not the ARC range of cards, but their big server cards as well will support this. So if that's correct, that means Raptor Lake Refresh is actually in play too, and that would be wild. I would assume it's only Arrow Lake or maybe Lunar Lake and newer, but still, that would be really good. I'll keep an eye on that. I starred the GitHub, so I'll report back later if we find out more about it. See, here's one about hardware undervolting. This is something Brad can talk about too, but I'm gonna take a shot at it. I'm catching up on TechPod episodes and just finished listening to the cooler discussions for CPUs. I recently decided to try undervolting my CPU and GPU because I was getting tired of the heat it was kicking out. I'm finding I'm getting similar performance for a lot less fire spitting out of the back of my tower. Have either of you ever undervolted your hardware, or do you have any insights into the practice? So, and that's from Doug in Santa Maria. So Doug, I know Brad undervolted his Raptor Lake Intel machine for years and years and years. I've done the same on GPUs for a while. So like for a long time, I was running 5090 on a 1080p monitor, and there's absolutely no reason to run a 5090 on a 1080p monitor at full speed. So I literally just opened up the NVIDIA app and turned the clocks, the power down a little bit. And as a result, less heat and less, less energy going into the system. So for the 9950X3D, I did some more aggressive undervolting. You can do per core curves that determine how much power is used at different clocks. And there's a tool that called Hydra Pro that basically is an optimizer tool that figures out the curves on each one. Now, it does that by running different workloads on each core constantly over long periods of time, and it does it in all kind of combinations of the cores. So on the 16 core part, it took a really long time to run. On an 8 core part, it takes a lot less time, but it gave me basically identical performance, sometimes even slightly better performance that I was getting on the native, just running stock clocks. I got better performance with that, or the same performance at worst on high multitasking load, multi-threaded loads. And I was using a lot less power. Now, the bad thing is the way to get that is you have to subscribe to this guy's Patreon, but it's called Hydra Pro 2.3A, I think is the most current version. And it's only for AMD parts last time I checked. So if you have that, and especially if you have a dual CCD chip, it's probably worth paying $5 and downloading whatever the current version is and figuring out what your curves are, and then uninstalling it and unsubscribing to the Patreon if you're not going to keep using it on the reg. But it's a quite useful tool. When Brad's back, we'll talk more about his experience with the 14900K, because that was a little different beast. Matthew in Ottawa asks, do you have any experience with Peltier coolers? Your recent topic about AIO coolers made me wonder whether either of you have ever encountered Peltier CPU coolers. In the early 2000s, I remember seeing one listed at a local computer store and never referenced since, which left me curious. Even if plugging your CPU coolers directly into left me curious, even if plugging your CPU cooler directly into a 110 volt outlet seemed ... questionable. Yeah, it was questionable, it turns out. We stopped using those for a whole host of reasons, but the main reason is so Peltiers work by having two different materials, two different metals fused together, and they apply current to one. And basically what it does is it pumps heat from one side of the device to the other side of the device. They can get really, really cold on one side and really, really hot on the other side. Now, that seems like it would be a good thing, right? But they're not particularly efficient in terms of how much heat is transferred per watt of energy put into the device. And because they get very, very cold, they can cause things like condensation problems. So in the old days, if you were doing a Peltier cooler, you had to do things like caulk around the components underneath the thing, because it would form ice and on the non-contact edges, and that ice, when the computer was turned off, would then melt and bad things would happen. So they weren't popular for a whole host of reasons, but the main ones were efficiency and the condensation problem. I have seen them used in other places over the years. So often they're used in like industrial devices where overall heat in the system matters less than keeping one particular thing cold. They have been used, I think people are using solid state controllers on them now. So in the old days, you would just power on or power off. I think now they use like PWMs to turn them on and off really quickly so that they do enough heat, enough cooling to keep your component cold without actually freezing the cold plate on the other end. Often Peltiers are what's in like those little desktop refrigerators that are wildly inefficient, the no compressor ones, or also in ice makers sometimes, like countertop ice makers. So they're, like I said, generally not super great in terms of the amount of heat that they generate. The other side of this is that they spit a ton of heat out the back. So you'd have to have some way to cool the backside of the thing, which usually in the old days was a big giant heat sink attached to a bunch of fans. So you didn't really get a whole lot of The benefit was you could get the temperature on the plate below ambient temperature in the room. The downside was you still had to you had two things generating heat instead of just the one now. So yeah, they didn't really take off. There's a bunch of interesting solid state cooling stuff coming now, like the fanless air movers. There's a couple of those. One is from a company called Frohr is the company that makes one of them. There's another one that's shipping now as well. So, and then there's also some interesting stuff happening with phase change on coolers. So the thermal interface, instead of using, I feel like we talked about this a few months ago, but instead of using like a carbon pad or thermal grease, they're using materials that are solid at room temperature and liquid at or more fluid at the temperature the computer operates at, so like 100°C. And those are incredibly promising and really exciting, I think. Here is a great question. It's from Joshua. I'm an English major by education and a commercial contractor by trade, so my summer reading lists often oscillate between classic lit and technical papers on building materials and practices. This summer, however, I have an itch to delve into the history of modern computation. That being said, my understanding of computers is extremely pedestrian. Do you have any reading recommendations that could serve as both a history of and explanation of current computing? But as a way of example, I really enjoy the YouTube channel Curious Mark. So I pulled a couple out here. Explanation of current computing is hard because the systems are really complicated, but like they're essentially what we've done since, let's say, 1996 or 1995, when the 386 and 486 were rising and popular, is add more cores and more math capability, more specialized math capability to the computer. But fundamentally, the computers are, the buses are faster. The ways you connect devices into those machines are faster. The connection between the CPU and the RAM is faster. The speed of the data storage, the hard drives or the SSDs, is infinitely faster. There's specialized coprocessors like GPUs and NPUs that do, make games or AI stuff in case of the GPU, and the NPU, I guess, makes your background blurry in Windows on calls sometimes, I guess. I don't know. But so what I did was I've read a handful of books that I really like for this. They're not exactly in the realm of what's the history of an explanation of how we got to where we are with current computing, but I have some basic stuff. The first one is called The Idea Factory. It's the story of Bell Labs, which was one of the early kind of corporate think tanks at Bell Telephone, the Bell Telephone Company in the 80s and 70s, where they did a lot of the transistor work and the stuff that became the core foundations of the modern computer. Now, it's been a long time since I read that, but I remember it being absolutely fascinating. It's not directly relevant today, but it is a good how we got there. In the same vein of that, Soul of a New Machine won the Pulitzer in like 1981. And it's about the first microcomputers, right? The early 80s microcomputers and the kind of path to turning those from an idea to a market. Fire in the Valley by Michael Swain is another great one. It's kind of the story of Silicon Valley in the 70s and early 80s when like Steve Jobs and Wozniak and the HP guys and everybody were building these computers in their garages that were started out as kit computers and then quickly became more mainstream as the 80s kind of adopted them for business stuff. And then that was written. Fire in the Valley is fairly old, I think. I can't remember when it was originally published. It was 2014, so it's actually 10 years old at this point. But yeah, it talks about stuff like the Bill Gates and Steve Jobs interactions when they were figuring out DOS and early Windows and Mac software. Hackers by Stephen Levy is another like mid 2010s book, I think, maybe early 2020s. Oh no, 2010. And it's about that same time, the early garage days of the personal computer. And then let's see, for newer stuff is a little harder. There haven't been as many books written about the last like 15 years. The last one is In the Beginning Was the Command Line, which is a series of Neil Stephenson essays about the history of human computer interaction and why he loves the command line. I mean, I think he's a Linux guy still, so explains a lot. I also, when I was looking for these books, I found, I did the classic thing where I searched for 3 things that I like in this, and then I found a list that somebody had made on Reddit that included those 3 things and a couple others. So I'll share the link to that, but they list some stuff. There's some really good stuff in here that's out of print, but I was able to find it at my local library. Bit by Bit is an illustrated history of computers by Stan Augerton. I read that a million years ago. It was absolutely fantastic. It's really, really interesting. It's from like 1985. It shows you pictures of circuits when they were still big enough that you could see them under a microscope, stuff like that. And then The Dream Machine by Michael Waldrop is also really good. This is a book about the person who, in the early days of computers, was thinking about how we were actually going to interact with them. And a lot of his ideas ended up shaping Windows and Mac OS and the internet and all these things that we didn't really think about as that are just like the background noise of computing now. That's by Michael Waldrop. The Dream Machine is what that's called. And it's about JCR Licklider. It's a fascinating read. I read that a long time ago as well. So anyway, I hope that helps. I'll share the list to this Reddit post as well as the books that I mentioned in the show notes, so you can find links to them. Let's see. We've got Nate from Fort Collins says, I've had my current email address for nearly 20 years now. I have a little over 68,000 unread messages in it, and I have used this to sign up for countless services. Yeah, so say we all. My question is, when should while I don't necessarily have a problem with this address, I'm usually able to catch important emails as they arrive. I could never truly curate this inbox. My question is, when should I declare email bankruptcy? I'd have a lot of services to update, and I'd have to build the habit of providing a good email address. Plus, I'd have to monitor this one to make sure I don't miss anything important that I'd forgotten to update. So this is a great question, Nate. I think a lot of us are hitting this now because we have 20-year-old Gmail addresses, and the experience of having a 20-year-old Gmail address that I wantonly signed up for a bunch of things in the pre-spam law days and used a common name combination for is bad. It turns out I get thousands of messages a day, and they're almost all garbage. So I did this a couple years ago, and it was fabulous. It has been an incredible change in my quality of life. I'm doing so I signed up for Fastmail. We talked about it a little bit, I think last week or the week before, but it lets you hook up at a domain level. So if you own a bunch of domains that you use for different things, so like I have the podcast domains, I have the other podcast domains, I have stuff for Twitch stream, I have stuff for consulting, and they're all on different domains and different email addresses, and I can set them all to come in to one place, and I can set it up on the domain level so that I can add new aliases and new addresses on those domains really, really easily, which is fabulous. It's not for everybody. It's not necessary for a lot of people, but for me, that works really well. They also let you do the private address thing that Apple and Android both launched a couple of years ago as, I think, premium features. Like Apple's, you have to be an Apple One subscriber, have to pay them for storage or something to get access to it. But the idea is you generate a throwaway email address that you can turn off at any time when you're signing up for something questionable. So that means, in addition to every service having a unique password because of my password manager, every service, every time I sign up for a Pizza Joints email plan, I generate a one-off email address and I use that instead of my primary ones. So even if they do sell my mailing, my list, my email to somebody else, then I can kill kill that email address and sign up for a new one. You can also turn it back on with Fastmail if you need to at some point in the future. So I've been doing that. It's been really good. I do have to go back in and check the Gmail address, my old Gmail address, fairly regularly to make sure I didn't miss anything. But it turns out often if I get, like, basically every time I get a, hey, you need to change your password on this because we've been hacked or something, I just put them on the new Fastmail one-off email addresses, and it's been really good. The other super interesting thing about this is that I think none of the services I've signed up for using the one-off email addresses, like, you know, Domino's and Micro Center and all that stuff, when I go into the folders that I've created to filter those, I'm not seeing any sold emails. So the spam that I'm getting isn't because some company I gave my email address is selling my email address to other people. It's just the background noise of spam is truly revolting. It's terrifying. There's a lot. So anyway, that's it on that. I would argue that the reduction in stress from missing emails coming into that important the important emails coming into the spam ridden address has been worth the hassle of switching over. And you can also do it in a more kind of gradual way. You like, it doesn't have to be something that you go through and re-sign up all the accounts at once. You can do it gradually over time, and that's fine, because that email address is still going to be there, and most of the things that you're getting email on from those services probably fine to ignore. Here's another Joshua. This was a different Joshua. Joshua asks, I'm in the market for a new laptop, and I'm thinking about buying a Framework 16. Although it will cost a little more upfront, it seems like it will be cheaper and more sustainable in the long run to get something that is infinitely fixable and upgradable. However, I have yet to actually put my hands on any Framework hardware. Are there any major downsides I should consider if I want to go this route? Also, do you think that other PC manufacturers will start making their laptops more repairable as a result of Framework's success in the marketplace? Okay, so the second part is easy. No, because Framework is still really, really small compared to your Dells and Lenovo's and HPs and all those. I think the right to repair laws and the like some of the laws coming out of the EU around right to repair and stuff like that probably are going to have more impact on that than Framework's success, unfortunately. Now, the Framework 16 model is a really lovely laptop. We had one in the PC World office for a minute, and I got to spend some time with it. The one thing I will say about that, and I think they fixed it on the refresh that they did last year or earlier this year, I guess now, because that's still a relatively new laptop. But the metal, okay, so how to describe this? You know how there's a keyboard and then there's a trackpad and then there's metal on either sides of the trackpad. And on most laptops, including the Framework 13, the metal around the keyboard and the keyboard itself and the metal around the trackpad are all one piece of metal. And the Framework 16, because they wanted to support multiple size keyboards and multiple placements for the trackpad, they did these weird spacers down on that place where you put your hands, where you rest your wrists on the laptop. And I didn't love that. The seams were kind of rough. It felt bad when you're scraping your hand across it as you're moving your hand back and forth. Now, the benefits of buying the laptop that you can replace hardware on are great. You can add an extra GPU later. You can replace memory. The memory is not soldered on. You can add multiple SSDs, all sorts of stuff. And like, you can do it when you want to, not when like, you know, Dell does their product refresh every other year. I also think that they built a single bottom panel that includes the trackpad for people who didn't like that join as part of their upgrade path. Yeah, so it's the one piece haptic touch module. So if you feel like having those kind of seams on the wrist rest are going to be a problem, just choose the haptic touchpad module instead of the modular one when you pick it up. And yeah, like I used a Framework 13 for a long time. It's a great little laptop. Like being able to open it up and unplug things or replug things if something gets weird or you need to adjust something, or if you need to change the Bluetooth in the device or whatever, is fabulous. So highly recommended. The 16 is big, so I assume you know what a 16-inch laptop is like, but it's a beefy guy, so consider that. See, let's do some Discord questions. I've done a bunch from the email address, but let's hit some Discords, I think. Oh, actually, well, I'll come back to that one later. So this one comes from O Moshi Yoshi, not really a Q, but I wanted to thank Will for that Whirly Pop recommendation all those years back. As someone who just moved to the UK where buttered popcorn is apparently not a thing, it has been a lifesaver. What's the point of this free healthcare if I can't clog my arteries up with some of that buttery goodness? Do people really not eat buttered popcorn in the UK? That's wild to me. I mean, that's like, look, I will put all sorts, like I'll do a cheese powder. I've been doing some nutritional yeast and onion powder and garlic powder lately. That's pretty bomb for popcorn. I'll do kettle corn, where you put a little sweet candy shell on the outside. I love a caramel corn. I'm never going to make that at home, but I enjoy the popcorn. For folks who don't know, the Whirly Pop is this. It's an aluminum bucket with a spinner. Basically, it's just like a pole that comes down the middle and a crank. And I want to say, I got the original recipe for this from somebody on the Shack News forums 100 years ago, like 20 years ago at this point. And I bought it and I was like, oh, wow, I can make popcorn better than the movie theater at home. It's 100% true. So the secret to the Whirly Pop popcorn, I'll repeat it here because I don't think we've talked about it on the Tech Pod at all, is, let's see, you get a Whirly Pop. It's about $20 on Amazon or at your local home goods store. You get some coconut oil, the solid stuff, not the partially hydrogenated coconut oil, the natural stuff. You get half a cup of popcorn kernels, whichever kind you like. Fresher is better. And then you put like 2 tablespoons of that coconut oil in the bottom of the popper. Oh, you want popcorn salt. So popcorn salt is a finer salt than you get normally. It's small enough that when it hits the popcorn, when popcorn pops, it's soft right when it comes out of the kernel, and it doesn't get crispy until it cools down, and the cellulose rehardens after it because what happens? Okay, we're gonna do some popcorn science here. When popcorn pops, what happens is there's a cellulose mixture inside the cell, inside the kernel, and the hardness of the kernel lets that get overpressured when it's heated up. So that the pressure inside that kernel reaches the breaking point of the kernel, and then everything, the liquidy, soft cellulose structure blasts out of the shell, and that's what looks like a popcorn kernel that we're all familiar with. Until the popcorn cools down, it's pretty chewy. Like if you've ever eaten popcorn right out of the popper, it's not a great experience. It almost is like gummy in your mouth. And while it's still in that state, if you hit it with really fine salt or something that you want to stick to it, it just gloms onto the moisture in the popcorn and gets sucked into the inside of the kernel. So you get this really fine, it's called popcorn salt. It's just a much, much finer salt than you get normally with table salt or kosher salt or whatever. And you chuck that in right as it's coming out of the popper. Anyway, half a cup of popcorn, 2 tablespoons of oil, put it in the Whirly Pop, crank the Whirly Pop slowly. You want medium high heat, and you want the oil to shimmer and almost smoke, maybe even smoke a little bit, because you want to cook that coconut, that sunscreen flavor out of the oil before you put the popcorn in. Otherwise, your popcorn's going to taste a little sunscreeny. So you cook it, you shimmer the oil, dump the popcorn in all at once, crank the handle on the Whirly Pop, close it up, crank the handle on the Whirly Pop fairly slowly. You don't want to like jam it around, and your goal is for all of the popcorn to pop in the tub as quickly as possible. So you want it to not pop, you don't want it to pop over like a 2-minute period. You want it to pop over like a 30 or 20 or 30 second period. And then as soon as the kernel, the popping rate slows down, you turn the heat off, dump it into a bowl, salt it. If you have butter, you pour butter on it. Whatever you want to put on it at that point is fair game. So highly recommend it. It takes a couple of tries to get the knack down, but once you do, you'll be able to make popcorn better than the movie theater. I'll put a link, if I think about it, I'll put a link to the Whirly Pop that I like. There's they got bought by somebody, and thanks to enshittification, there's now probably 30 different models. The only trick is if you have induction stoves, you have to get a different one, because obviously the aluminum doesn't work on that. So they have a steel one, I think, as a result of that. And then they also have a steel one for people who don't want aluminum, which is fair. They have models that have the plastic gear on the top and the metal gear on the top. My advice is to buy the plastic, the nylon gear one. I've been using the same one for 15 years now and have never had a problem with the gear stripping. But if you're going to make caramel corn especially, but even kettle corn, stuff that's going to be tougher to stir, you might want to get the metal gear. And if you want to do kettle corn in this thing, that also is easy. You just chuck a couple of tablespoons of sugar in the oil as the oil heats up, and then the popcorn will be kettled when it comes out, which is pretty easy. Let's see. MOSFET 555 asked a question that a whole bunch of people asked, which is, with Dual Boot Diaries closing and Brad not being able to make it onto the show with the stuff that's going on, please consider having Brad and Adam Patrick Murray on an episode of Take Control once things settle out. Phrased in the form of a question, would you consider having Brad and Adam on an episode of Take Control once things settle out? Yeah, absolutely. If not there, then here. We will do the promised Brad and Adam, and we'll talk about Linux episode someplace, whether it's here, or Take Control feed, or whatever. On the Take Control front, I finally have the first episode done almost. So maybe I'm going out of town next week. So maybe when I'm back from that, I'll post it. So it's later than I wanted to go, but we'll get it up eventually. Thanks for asking though, MOSFET. A bunch of people asked the same question, which is why I put it in here. So you can stop asking. It's going to happen. We will make it happen. I promise. Gerard VN says, it's been a while since I heard someone mention the Internet of Shit. Is the Internet of Things getting better, or are there just worse other things to worry about right now? Yeah, I think that's probably a little from column A and a little from column B. I feel like the current state of home automation for people who are using like Home Assistant is really, really good. Like the tools for building complicated workflows and complicated automations and all of that stuff are so good in Home Assistant now. The overall software is still like a little bit open sourcey and kind of confusing until you figure out what goes where and how it works. But once you internalize that, it's just really, really good. And so the way I use Home Assistant these days, I think we've talked about this before. But I use Home Assistant kind of as the container, and I point the Apple Home stuff to the Home Assistant install. So most of my day-to-day interaction goes through Siri because that's instant and direct inside the house from my phone to the Home Assistant install through the Apple Home stuff. It doesn't get mediated by the cloud like the Google Home stuff does. But yeah, it's quite good. There's like, I think the other thing that's happened and kind of congealed in the community is that, especially in the enthusiast community, and people talk about this in the Discord a lot, I don't buy stuff that requires a cloud connection anymore. Like if I'm looking at light bulbs or some switch thing or a voltmeter or a motion sensor or a camera, a security camera, any of that stuff, none of that is, if it requires a cloud connection, I just go buy something else because there's other better options that don't require the cloud connection. The other thing is that I've moved most of my motion sensors, like the door sensors and stuff like that, to the Matter and Thread radio instead of using Zigbee or Z-Wave, and it's just much better. It's like seems much more reliable, at least in my house. I know everybody's RF environments are different, but I've had phenomenal luck with that so far. So yeah, I think at the same time, is LG putting shitty ads in their TVs? Yeah. Is Samsung still trying to make screens on the front of your refrigerator a thing? Absolutely. Does my oven still not update the time, daylight savings time automatically, even though it's connected to the internet? Yeah, sure. That's absolutely a thing that happens. So, maybe we don't talk about it as much anymore because AI has made the whole internet kind of shit. Or maybe we don't talk about it anymore because people have gotten better at sussing out which things are good and which things are bad. I don't actually know. I'd be curious actually in the comments if people have feelings about that. I know, like, it's much easier to find out if something's going to annoy me before I buy it now than it was, say, 10 years ago when this stuff was all relatively new. So, but yeah, leave comments. Let me know what you think about this. I'm curious. Feral Pug says, I am in the market for a car. I'm thinking EV, but my old house only has a 100 amp panel. I have to get my panel replaced to a 200 amp if I want to be able to charge the EV, correct? Well, okay, Feral Pug, this is one of those tricky ones. It depends on how many open break. My understanding is that this is a consultant electrician situation. It depends on a couple of things. It depends on whether you want to do 240 volt charging, like the higher speed charging. It depends on how much you drive, and that depends on how much you drive every week. So if you're driving back and forth commuting every day and you don't have charging at work, then you probably want, depending on how long your commute is, you probably need to have the higher speed charging. Level 2 charging is what that's called. I drive 2 or 3 days a week, and we've been on level 1 charging, the 120 volt charging, for the 5 years that we've had electric cars now. And it turns out it's fine. Even when my daughter was going to school every day, like 6 miles each way, it was fine. We never hit a problem. If we needed to charge, I would just go to those fast chargers by the house and plug in for 20 minutes and be fine. But I think I only did that a handful of times. And maybe I did it once before we went on a road trip on the current car. So let's see, okay, so that's the first part of the question, is if you don't drive a whole lot, you're probably fine on the level 1 charger that comes with the car. If you are driving a lot and you need a level 2 charger, and your power your breaker box is full and doesn't have room for a 2 breaker line run to the car charger, then yeah, you probably have to upgrade the electric service for the house, which is a pain in the butt. I've had, for what it's worth, I've had a bunch of different quotes here. Labor is really expensive here. It depends on how old your panel is, like whether you have to do exterior work to put the new one on, like build, like in my part of California, a lot of our electrical panels are outside, so we have to build a little house that's big enough to hold the new panel, the new box, which is like another $500 or something. But it was, I think the last time I talked to somebody, it was like $8,000 to do the whole thing. And that included with more if I wanted to do the shunt over, so I could turn off external power and run off batteries, if we do solar and batteries. So anyway, that's that. The power company, depending on where you are, our power company seems to be encouraging people to move off gas. So I think we're going to be able to get money to do that from PG&E, maybe. If it's like every other PG&E incentive, the incentive will come nowhere near covering the actual cost of the work, though. So we'll see. But I highly recommend, like, the other option is that the fast charging, especially if you get a car that charges quickly, the fast charging is fine. Like, we usually only charge the Ioniq to 80% at home or on the fast chargers. And it's always like 20 minutes to 80% on the Ioniq. So like, I can park at the grocery store, plug the car in, go get groceries, come back, and by the time I'm done, it's at 85 or 90%. To go from 0 to 100, it's usually another 20 minutes past that so 20 minutes to 80% from wherever you are, and then it's 20 minutes from 80 to 100 if you're on a actual fast charger. There are some slower chargers, but that's like up to 230 kilowatts per hour, I guess. Okay, Super Pants says, how's the steam machine going after a month? Well, that is a fine question. I'm using it almost every day. Like, anytime the TV's free, if I'm sitting in the living room, assuming I'm playing something appropriate to play in front of the family, I'll load it up and play. I set up some emulation stuff on there, and I think I talked about this a few weeks ago, but I set up the emulation syncing, the save syncing between my, Linux machine, my Mister, and the server, and then it goes out to all the RetroArch machines in the house, which is awesome. And yeah, I've been playing, like, I played almost all of First Light on the Steam machine. I've been playing Rebel Galaxy Outlaw lately, which is an incredible game. And it plays great on the Steam machine. It required a little bit of hacking to get settings done, which we'll talk about, I guess, in a second here. And yeah, it's become like the only thing I wish it did that it doesn't do, and I absolutely understand why it doesn't do it, because it's an impossible ask. But I wish that I could hand off to like the Steam machine when somebody wants to use the TV who's not me. Because, like, I don't know about your house, but in my house, the TV, like, the order of priority for the TV is, if my wife wants to watch something, she gets first dibs on the TV because she hardly ever wants to watch anything. If my daughter wants to watch something, like, if anytime somebody wants to watch something that 2 or more people are going to be engaged with, then I'm not going to ask for the TV. If everybody's just kind of hanging around and nobody's using the TV, then I'll often put a game on. Also, it's basketball and baseball season right now, so in full disclosure, I do a lot of Steam Deck gaming during the two sports that I watch the most of. Scoot says, hey, now that you've had time to play with the Steam Machine, have you had any issues with the 8GB VRAM limitation? Are there any games where this gave you trouble? And then follows up with, do you find yourself using game defaults, tweaking game settings a little, or maybe tweaking game settings more than you like? So the 8GB VRAM thing isn't a problem because I'm playing at 1080p on almost everything. And I'm playing on a 1080p TV in the living room. So when I did the upscaling testing, that was on the 4K monitor in my office. So 1080p, it's 8 gigs, totally fine. If you were running a nicer TV, then that might be an issue. Tweaking the game defaults, generally speaking, the defaults out of the box for games that are showing as compatible are pretty good. There have been a couple of games that launch at 1280 by 800 or doing Steam Machine settings where I had to do a little bit of shenaniganry to fix that. Rebel Galaxy Outlaw requires a specific Microsoft C class. It's like MFC 4.2, I think, that they don't have flagged in the back end, or that Steam Proton doesn't know about. So you have to manually install that using Proton tricks, and then it works fine. But yeah, I haven't had to fool with any settings. I'm trying to think, I think the James Bond stuff worked great out of the box. Like Doom, the Dark Ages, and Indiana Jones all were totally playable at the 1080p resolution. I haven't had to fool with upscaling on anything, I don't think, yet. And yeah, it's quite good. It really is a console that lets me play Steam games in my living room without any of the, it's funny. I plugged in after I'd had it for 2 or 3 weeks. I plugged in a keyboard, a wireless keyboard. My wife was like, "Oh no, you're gonna do this again?" I was like, "No, it's just for 2 minutes." It was while I was setting up the emulated save syncing. And once I did it, I unplugged it, put it back in my office, and I haven't needed it since. So it's quite good. The one thing that was bad about that was that Toby, the dog, realized that he could turn on this TV by nosing the keyboard, because I had the keyboard leaned up against my chair where I sit. And his favorite game for a brief 20-minute period was, hey, look, I can turn on the TV, and it makes a beeping noise. And it was very reminiscent of the old, what was it, the launch Xbox Ones made that really good beeping sound when you touched the touch sensor on the front to turn it on. And I think when that thing came into the house the first time, my daughter was exactly the right age to smash the button. Anyway, so that's I still think the Steam Machine is quite good. Pricing stuff aside, situations beyond everyone's control, I don't think there's anything wrong with I think they did, it's a fair price for what you get. I'm sad that it isn't $700 or $600 or whatever it would have been had we not been in a Rampocalypse. Let's see. Octothorpe Bunny Fiend asks, sunscreen on the bald spots, yes or hat? It's either or both, never none. Getting a sunburn on the thin part of the back of your head is really, really unpleasant, and I don't ever want to do that again. I do sunscreen on the part even these days, because that's how I roll. But also, if it's sunny out, I usually have a hat on because it gets hot here. So yeah, I actually bought when I was at a hotel one time. I bought hair spray-on sunscreen specifically for your hairline and your part and your bald spot, and I highly recommend that. You just squirt a little on there and then kind of rub your head, and it works great. So highly recommended. Okay, I think I have one more question, maybe two. Cole asks, we know that most computer components are absurdly overpriced due to gestures wildly. My question is, do you think it's possible that could push down the prices of other components due to lack of demand from fewer systems being built? I know the world doesn't work this way, but I've got 90% of a system in the basement that needs a PSU. So I actually do think that's, I don't know if they're being pushed down. I think everybody's desperately trying to hold on to the margins that they have in the places that people are still buying stuff. But I do think that you have a potential for some deals that maybe wouldn't exist otherwise. So we saw some really good bundles on motherboards and CPUs when you bought them with like 1 8 gig stick of RAM earlier this year and stuff like that. So definitely keep your eyes out. I know that the case manufacturers are hurting because people aren't buying as many cases. I know that I've seen some spectacular monitor deals. Part of that's that OLEDs are getting cheaper. Part of it is also that like people aren't buying as much stuff right now. So you will definitely see some better deals as a result of that because nobody likes to hold inventory. My RAM has started getting wobbly. I got the, hey man, your power on self-test is weird. You might want to inspect this. And I looked at what it would cost to replace 64 gigs of DDR5 and was like, well, I'm going to probably just be a laptop guy from now on. Or I think I have a spare 32 gig someplace I could jam in. But anyway, wobbly RAM, not great right now. So yeah, that's that. Let's see. I have a couple of more questions here. This one's going to start some business. I hesitate to ask it, but I'm going to do it anyway. Nicholas says, I have a Pixel Watch 4 and recently Google changed the Fitbit app to Google Health. In the app, they inserted the Coach. The Coach is an AI that's supposed to offer you relevant information while taking all your data from your wearable into account. Turns out it frequently is wrong about a lot of the data and has changed data without people's permission, has the grating sycophantic tone of most AI chatbots and all the other terrible things associated with AI in general. Reading the threads of longtime Fitbit users who are angry with this change, I have also seen AI defenders. They talk about how you just have to get good at prompting, crafting the personality of the AI, and use prompts that are written just the right way, all in the hopes that the AI will actually continue to use those instructions. Reading this, I had a thought. Are AI apologists just a new version of the stereotypical Linux guy who a decade ago would insist that Linux is great for everyone, but you just have to insert steps that most users never take on their Windows machines and hope it works? Thanks, Nicholas. So, okay, I feel a little attacked, a little seen here with this Linux guy stuff, but I do understand what you're saying. I think that the stereotypical Linux guy is in a little shorter supply, or maybe the ratio of Linux users to, oh yeah, you just need to, run your cron tabs or whatever guy has reduced some. The thing that you're talking about where some people really, really like the AI and find it incredibly useful and have a bunch of things that they think are the reason they do that. I've experienced this myself. I also have had multiple conversations with people who I consider to be very smart software engineers, like people who are top of their jobs, really good at this, who have a completely different read on AI than I do. And it's because they're using, their workloads are different. The things that they're using it for are different and a little bit less, what's the word? Code is a little bit, if you're using an AI to generate code, there's a right way and it doesn't work way, and then there's probably some inefficient or wrong ways in between, but it's pretty good at doing the right, it's pretty good at generating code that does the right way if you constrain the prompts really well, especially if you're using some of the newer models. The frontier models is the thing I've been told. Like a friend of mine was telling me the other day that when they switched to the Claude, is it Fable, I think, the frontier model, they went from giving specific constraints to saying, hey, I need something that does this, like having it design functions that, and then having them architect the way the functions go together, to saying, hey, I need a program that does this and this and this and this and this. And it just spits out something that's usable. Now, do I want that applied to healthcare? Absolutely not. Like, there are 5 stories a week about people that ask ChatGPT for help and then don't go to the hospital and almost die because they have an aneurysm, or they have don't ask large language models about health stuff, especially not the general purpose ones, because they just tell you what you want to hear. Like, this is the fundamental problem with this technology. If they had rolled this out, okay, there's more than one fundamental problem with the technology, but this is one of the big, huge ones. Is the sycophantic tone is really, really damaging on a whole host of levels, and it makes a lot of people like that and the overall level of trustworthiness combined is a real 1-2 punch of bad ideas. So yeah, don't use the AI stuff for your health stuff. This is honestly the jamming AI into everything is one of the main reasons I'm not I'm not running Google stuff as much anymore, because like they're putting it everywhere. The results are still really bad. Like I wanted to say, you know, I started working on some stuff for the search engine episode, and I went back and I was putting the same query into Kaji and DuckDuckGo and Google, and for stuff that I know the answer to, right? And on those Google AI results, the answers were not just a little wrong, they were a lot wrong on some of the stuff. You know, they were like about stuff that is easy to search and find, like CPU generations and RAM limitations for chipsets and stuff like that. Like I was doing some kind of specific stuff that I was getting AI search results for that were terrible. So yeah, it's bad. Now, there are a couple places where, okay, so that's the answer to the question, I think. The real answer to the question is no, I don't think the AI apologists are a new version of the Linux guys. I think that your experience with AI is wildly divergent based on which models you have access to and what kind of stuff you're trying to do. So if you're trying to do one of the 2 or 3 things it's really good at, like if you're a spammer, you love AI, it's great for you. If you're writing specific kinds of code, it's really, really good and can really let you work a lot faster. If you are generating text, if you're asking healthcare questions, don't do that. That's bad. I think integrating it in the Google Health stuff is going to open up Google to some enormous potential liability. And I'm honestly surprised we haven't seen any enormous settlements yet for the people who got bad health advice from ChatGPT or Claude or Copilot or whatever. So yeah, it's shocking to me that they don't have guardrails on healthcare advice, childcare advice, like the places that the liability is going to be enormous if they mess up and kill somebody, when they mess up and kill somebody. I mean, and then that's not to say nothing of the mental health stuff that we've seen, where the LLMs encourage people to self-harm and stuff like that. So, and now I have to put a content warning on this episode. So yeah, so that, I think that'll do it on that. I feel like I need a cheery end note here. I should have just stopped at the Bunny Fiend sunscreen on the bald spot question, the indignity. Oh wait, let's see. Siradar asked for a Toby check-in. Toby is doing well. We've gone to 2 puppy classes. He knows how to sit and to wait, and he's learning how to walk on the leash without yanking it right now, which is very exciting. He is now pooping while the leash is on, which is very exciting, because for a long time he only would poop when the leash was off, which was challenging. Let's see, what else has he learned? We're working on lay down this week. It's challenging because he's long, so he just kind of scooches forward when you're trying to lure him into the lay down pose. But yeah, he's generally doing really well. He's sleeping really well. He is not being as much of a butt. We've gotten him these yak chews. They're like yak milk congealed into chew bone form, and he absolutely loves those. Those are resulting in a lot of nervous energy getting worked out, and he's a much more chill dog as a result. Let's see. I've taken him on, I think since the last time we talked about Toby, his vaccines have cleared. So we can take him on walks around the neighborhood now, which he loves. Like, he's extremely excited to go out the front door. I took him on a walk up to the beach and posted some pictures on my Blue Sky of that last weekend. And that was really fun. He's always excited to meet people. He's a really chill little guy, is the kind of TLDR. And if we can get him to poop reliably while I'm walking him late at night and the skunks are around, so he's on the leash, everything will be fantastic. That's all we're looking for. So yeah, Toby's doing really good. There's an upbeat ending, so that we aren't in bummer territory. And on that note, I guess I should probably wrap up the show, and we will be back next week with another edition of the Tech Pod. I do have to do a Patreon episode. Maybe I'll see if my favorite daughter wants to hop on the Patreon episode, and we can talk about technology a little bit, see what she thinks about stuff. Because I think it would be I would be curious to hear what she thinks about some of the stuff that we talk about here. So people have questions for a 13-year-old about technology, maybe send them to TechBot@content, or I guess since this is a Patreon episode, post them in the Discord, and I will pull from there. This is the part where we remind you it's a patron-supported show. We only take money from you guys, the audience, so we work for you, not for anyone else. So for $5 a month, you can get access to the patron-exclusive Discord, where people talk about all sorts of interesting things all the time. Everything from like what's going on in different art scenes to what's going on in everyone's favorite TV shows and movies. There's a robust Linux channel. When I was figuring out how to get the Mr. Save syncing working, the Mr. and other emulation channel was incredibly helpful. The Linux channel has been just an unbelievable resource over the last year as I've switched over to Linux full time. So this is the last episode of the month, which means I thank not just our executive producer tier patrons, but also our associate producer tier patrons. So let's see. Let's start with associate producers this month, and we're going to thank thanks to Star Soul, Eric, Brutal Kerfuffle, Felix Kramer, Andrew Dicey Shouldice, Andre M. Burke P.E, Ben Tallman, Nathan Phelps, Steve Lynn, Jad Rita, Ryson, Thomas Shea, and Thomas Shea. Thomas, you're the last one. Thank you also so much. And let's see. We also want to thank our executive producer tier patrons, including James Kamek, David Allen, Octothorpe Bunny Fiend, Jordan Lippett, Infelicitous Strips. Thank you also so much. We will see you, and I guess that's the end of the show. So please let me know what you thought of this. We don't know how long Brad's going to be out. I haven't had a chance to talk to him in a couple of weeks. But we will, as soon as I hear something, I'll keep you posted in the Discord or the next week's episode, if he's okay sharing it. And yeah, we'll be back next week with another episode of the Tech Pod. I have a fantastic guest lined up for next week. I think I'm really excited about it. And then I'm going on a trip the next weekend. So we'll maybe have some interesting stuff to talk about out of that as well. But thank you all so much for supporting the show. We appreciate each and every one of you. And we will be back next week with another edition of the Tech Pod. As always, please consider the environment before printing this podcast.